Hi, Simon. How are you?
Very good, Marvin. Really good to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to come on your.
Thanks that you're here. Simon, for the audience who may not already know you, could you shortly introduce yourself and give us a kind of backstory to you?
A backstory to me. Well, look, I was born in 1960 in Malta in the Mediterranean Sea, and my father was a free diver. And when I was 6 years old, he taught me the essence of how to breathe. He taught me that the best way to swim underwater as a free diver was not to breathe. So it's been something I've been passionate about all my life, and that the art of being healthy in the chosen field I had when I was 6 was to learn how to breathe as little as possible while moving as much as possible like a fish underwater. This actually led me to a lot of things, and in my teenage years, I had a Tibetan Lama. We traveled to Australia when I was 8 years old, and I've been living in Australia for the last 55 years or something. And in that time, I trained with teachers from Japan, India, China. I became a registered physiotherapist, and now I teach what I believe is the common origin of all traditional movement, and also what makes sense in the terms of modern medical Western science. And that's me, short.
That's like a super big input in like a super, super short amount of time. Yeah, so let's start like right in the beginning. I think it's like pretty amazing to start with the breath, because this is something I think even like nowadays, if we look at like all this movement and well-being culture, which is going on, it's like still not the like biggest part, and a lot of people miss out on like learning how to breathe and including this into their daily practice. How did this kind of skill set affected like all your journey and movement and yoga and well-being?
Around the same time that my father taught me how to hold my breath for extended periods underwater, not so long after that, I met a man whose name is Basil Brown, who was an Olympic athlete from Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And we met him on the boat leaving from Southampton in London. And we traveled 6 weeks on this boat to Australia, where we migrated to Australia when I was 8 years old. And Basil Brown had the ability to do what is effectively yoga kriyas. And so he taught me how to use my muscles of breathing, which are essentially all of the trunk muscles, to do what in traditional yoga they call Nauli Kriya and Kapalabhati and all these internal organ things, which made me come to the place now where I believe that when people talk about breathing, I think the two most important things you need to do to master health, happiness, and longevity with the use of breath is not to breathe more, as many people talk about, but to breathe as little as possible, to have the ability to breathe as little as possible while maximizing the use of your muscles of breathing. So, for example, when I swam underwater as a child, I'd be doing these movements of like this. And, obviously I'm not breathing underwater, but then it looks like my chest is expanding, contracting, and my abdomen is also expanding, contracting. And that's pretty much what it looks like some of my practice is doing now on the land. And so when you see modern people exercise, or a lot of people doing modern vinyasa type yoga, you see people's chest and abdomen expand, contract, breathe in, breathe out. Actually, it's a good thing to do, to expand the chest, expand the abdomen, contract the chest, contract the abdomen. But air going in and out does not have to be part of that. So the two most important things then are to learn how to control your muscles of breathing. And that means all your trunk muscles, but not necessarily having to incorporate air coming in and out at the same time. So most of my practice, I don't think breathe in, breathe out. I just think make wave-like expansion, contraction cycles, which include the wave-like motions of the spine, which you see in the last few years have become very popular in the modern world, wave-like contractions of spine, but also wave-like contractions of the trunk and abdomen. And as a physiotherapist, I know that many people talk about the engagement of the lower abdomen, but actually for most people, they can't really control the lower abdomen. The lower abdomen is the lower transversus abdominis muscles, which is a belt muscle. But to really control it, you need to be able to pull the lower abdomen in separately to the upper abdomen. And you can make wave-like contractions back and forth of the abdomen without needing to harden the abdomen at all, without needing to affect the functioning of the diaphragm either. And this I find that only 1 in 20 people can do. But when you can actually do it, you get tremendous control, incredible ability to regulate your heart rate. And perhaps listeners to this may not realize, but the heart is less a pump of blood through the body and works more effectively as a valve. And actually, you can use your breathing muscles as one way to move blood through the body very effectively without needing to use your heart. But it will actually regulate heart rate variability. And also there's another 10 ways of moving blood through the body other than the heart as well. And so part of my specialty, as you mentioned specialty before, is I'm interested certainly in having a pain-free functional body at all ages, but physical is not the only thing that we should be looking towards. I'm 64 years old now, and when I was younger, I was very excited about being able to do, like at one point, I could do 108 backflips in 5 minutes. It's a fun thing to
Yeah.
do. I still enjoy going dancing and, occasionally spinning on my head or popping into the splits as part of a fun trick to do while you're dancing. But my most important interest now, especially as I got older, is to have not just a pain-free functional body, but also to have lots of energy, to have also the ability to be energized but calm at the same time, and also to have good internal organ health. So you want to be able to have good digestive health, so you can absorb nutrients and eliminate wastes, to be able to live off very small amounts of food where necessary, but also to be able to digest food as you need it, but also to have good reproductive health, which means not just good sexual health, which is obviously fun to be able to, have sex appropriately where you need to, if that's something that you're doing, but also to have good fertility, if you're talking about men or women who want to have children. But more important than that, it's the sexual health that often people forget. It's the asexual sexual health, the ability to reproduce your brain cells, to reproduce your skin cells, even when you get to be 100 years old or plus. Because often people think that reproductive health is about sex or hormones, but actually it's the most important reproductive health that we need to keep nurturing is the ability for our own body cells to be able to regenerate, to renew themselves so we stay young. And that's very important to me. The other one that's important, of course, is immune health, so that you can recover from sickness easily, you can heal a joint easily, and that your joints are not being worn out. Your organs are not being worn out, but they're continually being regenerated. So immune health is very important to me as well. And for these things to be optimally functioning, you need two things. One is optimum blood flow with a very low heart rate. And the other one is to have a dominance of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is that state, which is euphemistically called the state of rest, rejuvenation, relaxation, regeneration, and which in some way is the opposite of, but it's not really the opposite, but it's the sister partner of the state which is called the sympathetic nervous system, which is euphemistically called that state of flight or fight or fear. So it's more important, I believe, to get blood flowing while being relaxed than it is to do what most people do, which is to exercise hard, which often gets heart racing, but it has some benefits, but causes stress, and to also sleep a lot and be rested a lot, where obviously you're very relaxed, but blood doesn't flow. So what I'm trying to get most into my practice and my teaching is the ability to get the benefits of something like sleep and exercise at the same time.
Okay, this is like super interesting, because it sounds like a whole system you developed over the time, and it sounds like it's like over a period of time existing now for you, and it seems like it developed with your age and with your like goals. So this is like super interesting. Do you think that this is like a kind of practice you can teach like anyone, or you think, like you said before, like 1 out of 20 is from the beginning able to like engage the lower abdominals? It's something you can learn and you can teach people, or it's something you include in the practice and it really needs like a period of time to get there?
I believe that what I'm teaching now is the common origin of all traditional movement, including Indian yoga, Chinese Qigong, internal martial arts, Japanese Zen meditation, the traditional practices of indigenous Australian Aboriginal culture, also the indigenous trainings from South America and South Africa that I've looked at. And it's also what animals do, and it's also in harmony with my understanding as a movement-based physiotherapist. This is the common origin. Now, can we teach it to people? The answer is yes, but the easiest people to teach my system to would be young people who have not been affected by incorrect practices. And when I say
Mm-hmm.
incorrect practices, the sorts of things that inhibit the teaching that I'm offering is ideas such as no pain, no gain, survival of the fittest. If you're good, you're going to go to heaven. If you're bad, you're going to go to hell. That there's no free lunch and that energy is limited. And also
Mm-hmm.
ideas which come into people's modern bodies, such as it's important to get your heart rate up. It's important to breathe more. It's important to have 3 good meals a day. It's important to, if you want to improve, you've got to suffer. These things, it's important to tighten the core, to lock your core. It's important to have a strong pelvic floor and tighten your pelvic floor. It's important to have a tight abdomen. It's important to breathe into your chest. All of these things are not wrong, but they're limiting people's ideas. And there's no one right way or wrong way. It's important to be flexible, not just in your body, but in your mind as well. So there's some of the things that I think limit people's ability to learn what I'm saying. If you let go of those ideas, it makes a big difference. And I believe I can teach anyone, and I do teach all manner of people of all ages, all sicknesses. But the most important thing I have to do when I meet people for the first time who are adults, especially those who have already worked with other systems, is to unlearn rather than try and learn new
Oh
things.
wow. Yeah, I love that part actually. Because
Unlearn.
this is super, super important. And I'm hearing out like you're as well not like a fan of like a dogmatic approach like we see nowadays. I think in today's society, even in all this well-being culture which is going on and all this movement about social media and all this stuff, it's pretty easy to get caught up like in special kind of opinions. And it often gets like super fast, super dogmatic because people think, okay, if you want to be like an expert in something, you have to really be clear about stuff. And even if it's like you said, it's not, there's a good core in some things, but it's not like usable for anyone. And so I really love this approach that you includes like everything you see, which is working like for a decade of time, and you include it into your approach. How do you go for, if you said like this reproductive aspect of your practice, how or what kind of stuff would you practice or would you teach to people? Because I have not seen this like in a kind of, typical yoga class, a typical kind of movement therapy so
Okay.
far.
So the organs of regeneration really include your immune system, your digestive system, and reproductive system. They're the ones that are going to really help you heal, continue to grow, nurture, recover, etc. All those 3 organ systems are predominantly located in your lower trunk. So, and then the organs that feed them include your heart and lungs, which work in harmony, and they're in your upper trunk. So one of the easiest approaches that I take to trying to help people access their reproductive, digestive, and immune system is to work with the trunk and move the trunk. So the trunk can move in 5 different ways. The trunk can bend like the spine, forward and backward. It can bend side to side, and it can twist. So I call these 3 dimensions of movement of the trunk. And there's 2 more dimensions of movement, which include lengthen and shorten, because you can also lengthen your spine by getting rid of the curvature and also by increasing the space between each vertebrae. And then the 5th dimension of movement of the trunk is expansion and contraction, which the spine can't do, but the trunk can. So if you emphasize and enhance all 5 dimensions of movement of the trunk, then the lower trunk starts to move as well. Now, the lower trunk for most people is predominantly locked. If you look at a typical anatomy textbook, it says there is not much movement in the lumbar spine. And actually, work as a therapist like me, and you talk to any other physiotherapist or a chiropractor or an osteopath, they'll say that most people's lumbar spine is very mobile around L5S1, but doesn't move so much around L1, 2, 3, 4. And part of the reason for this is from sitting on chairs. So when you sit on chairs for the typical 5 to 15 hours a day that the modern adult does and has done since they're kids, then the front of the hips become very, very tense. And predominantly the psoas muscle, which is a main muscle which goes from your inner thigh across the front of the hips and attaches to your lower back, that muscle becomes so tight that it makes the front of the hips very, very tight, which then leads to a very large prevalence of hip replacements in modern adults over the age of 50. And then it also pulls the lower back inwards at L5S1 and creates part of what we see as the natural lumbar curvature, which I don't believe is that natural at all. I believe it's been emphasized because of this very tight psoas situation that comes from sitting too much. And then the whole lumbar region becomes very compressed. And then the whole lower trunk also becomes compressed because of people thinking that it's important to draw your navel to the spine, to walk around with a strong, tight core, because many people won't like relaxing their abdomen, because if they do, the belly hangs out, you look fat. And, not everyone likes to look overweight. In fact, most people encourage that you should have your belly sucked in. But this actually represses the ability of the natural function of the immune, digestive, reproductive systems. So the two most important things I get people to do to try and work in the way you're saying to improve their internal health is to get them to stop tightening their lower abdomen, stop tightening the lower abdomen and the pelvic floor, and trying to get them to move the whole trunk in the way I'm saying, in these 5 dimensions. And when they can learn to move the trunk in the 5 ways I'm saying, then gradually that helps them to start moving the lower trunk in the way I'm saying. And as I said, it's very few people who can move their internal organs like I can. But once you start moving the whole trunk in that way and stop tensing the lower trunk, then you start to have the ability to move your lower abdomen in a circle, or in a circle forward, backward, or side to side. In Indian yoga, they call it Nauli Kriya. But Nauli Kriya means not just your abdomen going circularly this way. It can also go vertically or diagonally or in and out or figure eights.
Okay, I just have seen it like...
You can massage your internal organs. But before you can learn it in the lower trunk, learn it in the whole trunk. Learn how to move your spine. But of course, to move your spine, you have to do 2 things. One is you have to stop stiffening your spine, stop locking your core, and then you have to know how to move it and encourage it. Stop blocking the movement and then encourage the movement. 2 things.
This is super interesting, and it adds up to like another conversation I had with a friend of mine who's as well yoga teacher and physiotherapist from Austria. And he also said something like, there is not such a thing like a wrong movement. And nowadays we live like out of a kind of, we want to have like pretty clear rules of what we have to do. And this is why things like bandhas get from like one point in like yogic history or like philosophy to whole nother level nowadays in the practice of a lot of people. Like you said, all this really flexing and really engaging stuff is like, just getting to one end of a spectrum and not using like the full potential of that. Do you think that your practice changed over time? So when you get now to all of this and all these abilities to like use your whole kind of abdominals, was this from the beginning when you started out with this kind of practices and experimenting for yourself like an idea you wanted to reach, or was it, like you said before, you started out, okay, I want to do like 108 backflips in the beginning?
I was very lucky to be shown these internal movements when I was 8 years old and get the ability to learn how to do them from my father when I was 5 or 6 years old. Because initially, to learn these internal movements, which in yoga we call kriya, things like dauti and nauli kriya, these things in the beginning, you learn them while not breathing. So to learn them for the average person, you have to learn how to not breathe first. I was lucky my father gave me that first. And then George Borg-Olivier, his name was. And then Basil Brown, a family friend, taught me the Nauli Kriya when I was 8. But I didn't realize the super importance of these practices. So I kept that as one practice, which I maintained routinely every day for the last 56 years.
Wow.
But then I didn't realize how much that played into being the core of all movement, the source of all movement. On the weekend, I was thrilled to go to a wonderful dance party where I met some wonderful young people, including a couple who were half my age and a couple who were even younger than that. We had some great dancing. And some of these young people had incredible abilities in their bodies. They were doing beautiful fire dancing and twirling and hula hooping and juggling. And I could see that their spines were a lot more flexible than mine. But when I showed them how to make their spine move from their core, they were quite stunned because their cores were quite stuck. And so when I first showed how to relax the core and then move from the core, when I call the core region to be that region which is between the navel and the pubic bone, between the top of your hips and your tailbone, inside which is basically the center of your lower trunk. That point is where all movement should start from. But all around that region, which is also the region of your internal organs, is basically locked. But when I show to young people who have very good ability in terms of movement, in terms of martial arts, gymnastics, yoga, that actually if you start the movement from there, they get better handstands, better get a martial arts, better dance, better everything. So this is something which for me came to me when I was very, very young. But then in my 20s and up until my early 40s, I didn't realize how important the Kriya was for all the other movement. So I don't think my practice has changed as much as it's integrated. And so now, rather than doing a whole bunch of separate practices, now I realize much more how they all have one common origin.
That's like super interesting. I
I mean,
think to use this as a base is amazing, yeah? Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that's okay. No, you asked me another question. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. When you're teaching now, do you believe in like I said, it sounds for me like you created like a kind of system out of like all these different aspects. How do you go like evolving your own style of teaching or your own style of like practicing yourself? Does it all starts from, okay, going into stuff and like you now kind of like you got to the Dalai Lama, you got into yoga, you got into like Chinese medicines, you get into like physiotherapy. So it's like a broad kind of topics and you stick like pretty open to that. Do you do this like still and being open to all of these opportunities to new stuff coming up?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you'd be a fool to not be open to everything. I say, I believe nothing. I'm open to everything.
Okay,
That's
great.
one of my favorite mottos, So there's no
Hmm.
wrong or right, and there's never any right way for any one person, but there's usually the best way to get the best results on a physical, physiological, mental level, if you're looking at your body. But also, if you look at your life, I look at 5 levels. How does a practice affect you physically in terms of your muscles, your joints, strength, and flexibility? How does your practice affect you physiologically in terms of your energy levels, your nervous system, your ability to heal, recover from sickness, digest and absorb nutrients and eliminate waste, etc.? And then how does it affect you mentally in terms of your ability to have happiness or sadness as your default natural function, mentally in terms of mental clarity, so that your brain has adequate blood flow? How does it affect you to think logically, which is one way of thinking, but also to think intuitively, which is another very valid way of thinking? Because as males and living in a modern patriarchal scientific world, I think we're brought up with this idea that everything should be logical. But actually, every cosmologist will tell you that, give us one miracle and we'll explain the universe. Because actually, all science is based on a bunch of logical things that when you come down to the first steps are usually from guesswork. Let's assume the Big Bang happened where everything came out of nothing, then we'll tell you how the universe happened. How did the Big Bang happen? Well, you might as well call it God, because there's no other explanation. But so even mathematics is based usually on a bunch of assumptions, and those assumptions are usually, you might as well just call them intuition. So I believe proper mental health is about connecting the thinking brain in our head with the gut brain at our core. Because, for those who don't know it, we have this large network of nerves in our skull, which we call a thinking brain. But there's also a very significant large network of nerves called the enteric nervous system, which is wrapped around all these internal organs, which I was telling you about, the immune, digestive, reproductive organs. And this large network of nerves called the enteric nervous system is euphemistically called your gut brain. And, people hear about this, so that you should trust your gut feelings. But actually, the gut does have feelings, and it's more of an intuition type of thinking. But it's not minimal either. The enteric nervous system is more nervous tissue than there is in your sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system combined. There's more nervous tissue in your gut brain than there is spinal cord. And there's more nervous tissue in your gut brain than is in a cat's brain. And cats are, let's face it. So this
That's
is
amazing,
something,
yeah.
it is, isn't it? So I believe that really good mental function means you can connect thinking logically with also feeling intuitively. And so what I was saying was that when we're looking towards what's right or wrong in a person's health and how to use one's practice to encourage good health or good results for your body, it has to be physical results, physiological results and mental results. Because sometimes people will say, I've got a really good way of making you flexible and strong. And you go, yes, it's quick. I can see you get results. But what are the long-term results physiologically? Because, we see many people doing yoga, gymnastics, dance, martial arts, sports, and they get really good results when they're 20, 30 years old. But when they come to 50 or 60, their joints are a mess. Many of them get cancer, tumors, and they die. So I believe we need to look at physical health, but also physiological health. And then many of these people, when they work with no pain, no gain, survival of the fittest, then their mental function becomes horrible. They become aggressive, dysfunctional, competitive, not loving, because the internal state is one of flight or fight. Then the mental state becomes one of flight or fight. So I believe it's important to have good physical health, physiological health, and mental health. And so sometimes someone might say to you, this is a great exercise to get you strong. Yes, but is it going to destroy your energy levels? Is it going to mess with your mind? So I want at least those three parts of your living physical body to be healthy. But also your life is not about your body. It's about how you interact with other people. So I also want to make sure that the practices I do and I teach also help people with their social life as well. And so to help with social life, you want to do things like, I believe that a main aim of the practice, especially if you use the word yoga, because the word yoga is bandied around all over the place now. And people think that yoga is about, getting strong arms so you can do hand balances, or getting flexible legs so you can do the splits. Because that's what you see on Instagram, isn't it? When you see the word yoga, that's what you see. If you see the word meditation, you're more likely seeing a person sitting with their fingers in a funny position and their head straight and their spine sitting in an uncomfortable position. But when I first learned meditation, which was in the 1970s, I first heard the word, and then I saw a picture of a person meditating. It was this man who was pretty much sitting naked in the snow. And I'm going, meditation? That looks difficult. Because they're naked in the snow. Then in the 1980s, many of my friends said, oh, I'm learning meditation now. And I'm going, oh, that's really difficult. But when I saw what they were doing, they were just sitting in a cold room with a blanket covering them, getting cold and bored. And I'm going, that's not meditation. Unless you're sitting naked in the snow, what are you doing? Because it's about making blood flow effortlessly. But of course, meditation, you know what I mean? So many people in India, if you said, does yoga mean? The only translation they can give is meditation. Meditation and yoga should mean the same thing. So to me, meditation on a physiological level is about moving good energy and loving information inside your body. And physiologically, that means encouraging blood flow through a pain-free, functional body while being as relaxed as you can be. So to me, that should be the aim of the practice. If you can move good energy and loving information through your own body, in other words, have healthy blood flow with a low heart rate, without tension or stretch or racing mind, then you're circulating good energy and loving information inside your body. And that's the way you connect your cells. Then the cells want to heal, they want to love. But then that's a model for how you can be in the world. So I figure if you circulate good energy and loving information inside yourself, you have a model for how you treat everyone you meet. And then social interaction becomes easy. I mean, I love being around people. I love being with my friends. I love going to a place where I don't know anyone and meeting new people. And it's something which it's not that hard to do. If you can make love to yourself, you can make love to the people around you. And that doesn't mean having sex. That means just being able to communicate in a way where you can recognize that you are connected to the person you're talking to. You and me are cousins, maybe not first cousins, not second cousins, but we're obviously connected in some way because we all know we're connected to our mother, who actually will say that she saw you grow inside her. She knows you are part of her. And logically, we all have mothers, which means we all must be connected, in which case, surely we should be able to recognize that connection. And once you recognize you're connected with someone else, treat them like you'd want to be treated yourself. So to me, the essence of our practice should be to make the world a better place by learning how to connect with ourselves in a loving way so we can connect with others in a loving way too. Now, once you learn to do this social aspect of your life, then it's also important to look at how your life is. Do you have financial success enough to make a living? Now, you don't have to earn money, but you do have to have a place to live. You have to have a lifestyle. So I call this, we could call it financial success, but it could also be lifestyle success. Just be able to have a lifestyle which is sustainable in a way where you're not hurting people. I don't want to earn money by becoming some sort of life-slaughtering multinational company which just rapes and pillages around the world. But I'm really happy if I can make a living in an ethical way, or to maybe live in a community where I'm not even exchanging money, but we're doing something where everyone can live together as a team. So I'm saying that when people talk about doing things for health in terms of posture, movement, breathing, mental control, diet, the sort of things that we do for ourselves, we want to make that successful and have good long-term results in 5 levels: physically, physiologically, mentally, socially, financially, or lifestyle-wise. And so this is what I'm trying to teach. And this is something which you have to think of in 5 ways. It feels really nice. And you go, isn't that how some people practice? Some people practice
Interesting, yeah.
yoga, where all they're doing is making themselves hurt. But when they stop, it always feels really nice. I want to practice so it feels nice while I'm doing it. I don't want to wait till I finish to feel nice. Otherwise, you're not living in the present moment. So to me, the art of meditation is being in the present moment, connected to the activity that you're doing at the time. So that means you have to enjoy it while you're doing it, not just shavasana afterwards. Now, many people will practice in a way also where it feels really fun while they're doing it. It feels really fun afterwards, but next day they wake up and they're in pain. And you go, that's not much good either, because surprise, surprise to people who do exercise, but 95% of the population of this modern world, if they wake up after an exercise routine and next day it hurts, they're not doing it again. It's only 1 in about 20 people who actually likes suffering in a way where the next day, even if the suffering wasn't while they're doing it, but if they wake up in pain the next day, they're not continuing. Trust me as a physiotherapist that the one biggest limitation of me healing people is someone comes to me, they say, I've got a knee injury. Can you help me? And I give them these exercises and they go, oh, my knee's fixed. And I go, it's not fixed. You have to do these exercises
Yourself.
3 times a day before meals. Like I always say before meals, it makes me sound like a doctor. And I say, do these exercises 3 times a day for the next month and you'll be healed. And then you see them at the end of the month. And they go, I say, how's your knee? And they go, it's okay. But I say, did you do the exercises? And they go, no, I didn't have time. People to recover have to do some movement every day. And unless that movement is not just pain-free, it must be pleasant. If the movement is pleasant, they're more likely to come back. If the movement doesn't hurt, they might come back. But if the movement is painful while they're doing it, they're not coming back. And if the movement hurts the day after they've done it, they're probably not coming back either. So I think the reason why people are in pain the next day is because many people practice in a way where they overstretch, overtense, overbreathe, overthink, and this produces the production of endorphins, adrenaline, cortisol, the hormones of the flight or fight response. And these hormones, especially like endorphins, are like the body's own morphine. Adrenaline and cortisol are like coffee and cocaine. And when you breathe a lot, which many people do, they reduce blood flow to the brain and encourage nerve sensitivity inside the body, which gives like a marijuana effect. So many people who practice the way most people practice when they're running, when they're exercising, or when they're doing modern yoga, when they overtense, overstretch, overbreathe, make their heart race, they stimulate the production of hormones inside their body, which make them go, whoa, I feel amazing. I'm on a runner's high or a yoga high or a prana high. And you go, no, I think you're just stoned on the body's own marijuana, cocaine, caffeine, heroin at the same time, which is why they're not feeling pain until the next day when the painkillers wear off. And so to me, it's not acceptable. Most of the people who come to my courses, they're surprised because I do stuff which they feel and they get progress and they enjoy. But then the next day, they're not sore. And they go, why are we not getting sore? Because we see we're doing the same practices that they do elsewhere, the same postures, the same movements. But the way I'm making them do it means they're not getting pain the next day because I'm not making them stimulate a flight or fight response. And I believe that the problem with creating a painful body the next day is not just that it puts you off, which many people get put off, but also then the long-term results are not good. Because many people with this type of practice, then when they get to 50 or 60 years old, they have massive joint problems. They have cancer. And this is what I've seen in many of my friends who practiced the intense type of practices I did in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, which I then stopped by the end of the 1990s because I realized they were not sustainable. So now I practice things for 5 periods in terms of temporal periods. I want to practice so I'm feeling good while I'm doing it. I want to feel better after I've finished. I want to still feel good in the short-term future, like next day, in the next few days. I want to still feel good over the next few weeks or few months or few years, the short-term future or intermediate-term future. But then I also want to guarantee that in 20, 30 years' time, I'm still good. And this is something which you can't do very often in your life. The only way to ascertain whether your practice is good for the long-term future is to have good teachers, because it has to be something which has been studied over a lineage of many generations. And I've been thrilled to have teachers, who have a good lineage. One of my teachers, the Chinese man who I learned with for the last 15 years, his grandfather is currently 121. When
Oh,
someone
wow.
is doing
Yeah,
things, then this is a good, way of saying, well, the
this
practice must be okay.
definitely.
I was
Yeah.
lucky also to learn with Iyengar and Patabi Joyce, and Jessica Cha, who were fantastic yoga teachers. But it took me a long time to integrate their teachings to me in my 20s. Not everything they said to me when I was 20 made sense. But now, when I'm in my 60s, now I understand where they're coming from.
I
So I
think
want
as well.
this
Yeah.
message better. Yeah, go on, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I think as well, like your perspective can change over time and your own practice, right?
Yeah, you
Like you do.
see what happens to your body. You see what happens to your friend's body. And we're in a unique place in history now where we're also seeing what's happening to people all over the world, because we can see it from the internet. And so people's, good or bad results, you can monitor over a period of years.
Simon, this is amazing. I would love to talk to you like I think 3 or 4 hours longer because I have
Close to my favorite.
so many more points. But yeah, we're short in time today. So thank you so much for all this input. I think there's a lot in there and like a lot for people to reflect on their own practice as well as like on different kind of value points in there they can take. Yeah, Simon, if people now would like to get in touch with you, would like to get know more about you or like would get to work with you, how could they reach out to you?
You can contact me from my website, which is under my name as one word, simonborgolivier.com. And I think also you can access that website by going 5dimensionalflow.com, either with 5 as a number or 5 as a word, because I talked to you before about how the spine and the trunk and the core can move in 5 different ways or dimensions. So I call it 5-dimensional flow as the basis of all yoga, martial arts, qigong, dance, gymnastics, therapy, etc. Yeah, they can contact me whenever they like from the website, or if they write to me, I'm happy to give them my telephone number and we can talk verbally or with chat on WhatsApp or something like that. I'm very happy to share stuff. And I'm happy
Right,
to practice you.
I will link everything below for sure so
Thank
people
you.
find you.
Yeah.
So Simon, so much thank you for like taking out that time. Hope to hear you soon.
I look forward to chatting to you again, and thank you to everyone for listening. And I just say, make your aim to move good energy and loving information inside your own pain-free functional body. Stop blocking it, tense less, stretch less, breathe less, think less, and make the energy flow. Move from your core. Breathe naturally or breathe from your core and move fluidly and gracefully and enjoy your life. Look after your body. Help other people enjoy their lives and look after their bodies. That's what I think. Thank you very much, Marv. It's a pleasure to chat.
Thank you.